One. Hello and welcome back to the Voltage Library. Today we're going to be talking about panic disorders and anxiety. So, let's clear some things up. If you've had a panic attack, you know it does not feel psychological. It feels physical. It feels like something inside your body just kind of flipped without your permission. So, your heart's going to race, your chest's going to tighten, you're going to feel dizzy, your hands are going to shake. Um, but you think something is seriously going wrong, and most people get told it's anxiety, but we're here today to debunk that. But first things first, let's just get our quick little disclaimer out of the way. This is an educational channel only. We are not diagnosing or replacing medical care. We are explaining physiology, what the body is actually doing under stress load. Okay. So now that we got that part out of the way, let's talk about anxiety because anxiety is not random. Panic is not random. The body does not malfunction without a mechanism, and we're going to explain that today.
Exactly. And that's the part that people are missing. When you get handed a diagnosis, you're
Hmm.
not really handed an explanation. You're handed a label, but the body is not vague and it's not mechanical. And if the heart is racing, there's a signal telling it to race. If breathing changes, there is a signal telling it to change. So instead of asking, why am I like this? The better question is, what signal is firing?
Right. So let's define the experience first. So I'm sure anybody reading this list of symptoms is going to relate, but let's just go over some of the common symptoms in what they call a panic attack. Excuse me, racing heart, skipped heartbeats. You'll feel your heart kind of like flopping around. That's what mine does. Chest pressure, tight throat, shortness of breath, dizziness, tunnel vision, shaky hands, internal tremor, nausea, diarrhea, random adrenaline surges. I used to get inappropriate adrenaline dumps. I remember those very well. Waking up at 3 a.m. wired. Now, a lot of things that people don't tell you. Sorry, I just messed that up. What people don't tell you is that all of these things are survival responses. So your body's not just doing these things randomly. It just isn't like, oh yeah, let's all of a sudden make things race and make things skip beats and all that. It's actually a survival response.
Exactly. And what's important here is that none of these are defective responses. They're appropriate responses to danger.
Hmm.
And let's say you're being chased. Your heart would race. And if you were about to fight, your digestion would slow down. If you need oxygen quickly, for instance, your breathing would change. And the
Yep.
problem isn't that the system knows how to survive, the problem is that it is surviving or in survival mode when it doesn't need to be.
Right. So that is an intense feeling. So if you've had an actual legitimate scary experience like a car accident or something that gets that adrenaline spiking, almost falling off something, that response you feel is exactly what's happening in a panic attack. And that's why people end up in the ER thinking that they're having a heart attack because physiologically it's very intense.
It is very intense. It is
Yeah.
very intense. And when those tests come back normal, that doesn't mean that nothing is happening. It just means that the test doesn't measure nervous system tone.
Right, there's no test for that. There's just nothing that they can do
Exa-
to like, "Oh, your nervous
Exactly.
system is freaking out." They don't do that. They don't look at the electrical system, and that's why we made this channel, right? So,
Right.
let's walk through the mechanism. What is actually happening, okay? So, the amygdala is the threat detector. It reacts fast. It doesn't care if a threat is physical or imagined. It cares about survival and survival only. Your life or death. That's what it cares about. Are we going to live or we're going to die? So, when it activates, it triggers the sympathetic nervous system. Now, the sympathetic state is what most people with chronic illness are in, side note. So the adrenaline rises, the cortisol follows, the heart rate will increase, the blood pressure increases, breathing speeds up. All of that goes together. But here's the piece that most people don't think about. Before that adrenaline rises, before that cortisol spikes, there is an electrical signal that happens in the body. The neurons fire electrically. So every nerve impulse is an electrical event. Your heart rhythm is electrical, your breathing rhythm is regulated by electrical firing in the brainstem. So we have to think about it that way. Look at the big picture of the body. Anxiety is not chemical, it is actually electrical amplification.
Exactly. So if we slow this down, what you're saying is the body isn't randomly dumping adrenaline. The nervous system is sending a signal that
Yes.
tells it to. And that signal depends on membrane stability. It
Hmm.
depends on how easily neurons depolarize. And if that firing threshold is low, neurons fire easily. And if neurons fire easily, the amygdala will activate quickly. And whenever it's doing that, adrenaline ends up following.
Yep, you've got it. So that membrane potential, when I say membrane potential, I'm talking about the surface of the cell. Um, that membrane potential is everything. It really matters. Every neuron maintains a voltage difference across its membrane. So that voltage determines how easy it is for that neuron to fire that signal. So if membrane potential is weak or unstable, that firing threshold lowers. That's when we start to see the short outs in the system and things going wrong and the tremors and all that stuff. Those are electrical misfires in the body. So the lower your threshold means the higher your reactivity. Okay. Now layer that into
Right.
our crazy environment that we live in now, because we are not meant to live the way we're living. We're meant to be outside in a hut, in the dirt, sleeping in the dirt, digging in the dirt all day. We don't do that anymore. Our
Exactly.
environment has completely changed. Now we work 9 to 5s. We're barely getting sleep. Most people have 2 jobs to get make ends meet. They keep us in a constant state of stress. So you're layering all this reactivity on top of all of that. So it's years of elevated cortisol, poor sleep, blood sugar instability, mineral depletion, constant overstimulation. And over time, which is what's happened to most people, if you're watching this, you probably relate to the title and you're like, I want to know more about that. It's because we are all constantly overstimulated. And guess what? We're keeping all of our nervous systems in that sympathetic state. All of these environmental factors lower that membrane potential even further. So now the small triggers create big reactions. So to put it in layman's terms,
Yeah,
there's
that's
no buffer.
basically
No, there's no buffer. Sorry, there's no buffer. So your electrical system has a buffer. Your membrane potential is your buffer. The lower it is, it's not going to filter anything, any potential threats to the body. There's no what's the word I'm looking for? There's no filtration system. Like the immune system has the gut as a filtration system. The nervous system's membrane potential, that is the filtration system for the electrical system in the body. Hopefully that makes sense. But yeah,
ex-
all of those things stacked on top of each other, now we can see why everybody's an anxious mess and nobody's sleeping.
exactly, and that's how panic pretty much ends up building.
Right.
So, if you're about to have a panic attack,
Mm-hmm.
um, seems like the first thing you're gonna notice is maybe like a skipped heartbeat, and then your
Yep.
brain flags it, and then
Yep.
your nervous system is already reactive,
Yep.
so it's basically saying danger, danger, and then your adrenaline will end up increasing, your heart
Yep.
rate increases, your
Yep.
breathing shifts, your carbon dioxide drops, and that
Mm-hmm.
drop in carbon dioxide causes dizziness and tingling. And as somebody who's had many panic attacks myself, I can say that that has to be one of the most irritating things. You're already freaking out, and then the next thing you know, your hands and your mouth is tingling, and you're just convincing yourself on this carousel that this is getting worse. I'm going to die. That's
Yeah.
absolutely kind of the train of thought there. And your
Mm-hmm.
brain really interprets those sensations as more danger.
Yeah.
So the loop really ends up continuing to feed itself.
Oh yeah, I've been in that loop. I've been in that loop plenty of times. Like, oh, my heart's freaking out. Now I've noticed that my heart's freaking out. Now I'm not breathing right. Now I'm not breathing right. Now my you know what I mean? It just keeps going.
Yeah,
Right. And that's kind of the state that I find everybody with chronic illness in, right? That feedback loop, that constant like symptom overanalyzation and stuff, that is all normal. That is all natural. What we have to do is fight against that. So now we're going to talk about the frequency blend that saved my life, saved Mandy's life. That is terahertz and PEMF blend. The blend is where the magic is. So let's get into stabilizing that signal. Okay. So first we're going to talk about PEMF. So pulsed electromagnetic field is what that stands for. And it's actually putting a controlled pulse into the body. So that field interacts with the cellular membrane charge that I was talking about. So there is actual research, you can Google this, showing that pulsed electromagnetic fields actually influence that membrane polarization and ion exchange. Sodium, potassium, calcium movement all across those membranes, that all requires the proper voltage, the proper charge. So that matters because ion movement determines whether a neuron even fires in the first place and then whether it's firing correctly. So if membrane polarization, excuse me, improves, firing becomes more regulated over time.
exactly. And if that firing becomes more regulated, then the threshold ends up rising. And that
Yes.
means that the amygdala doesn't activate from every small input, which is huge. The
Right.
sympathetic nervous system doesn't flip on from every skip beat. So instead of suppressing adrenaline, what we're doing is we're influencing the signal that actually triggers it.
Right. So that's just the PEMF portion, right? So now we're going to talk about the blend, the other frequency that's involved, and that's called terahertz. So terahertz, it operates at a frequency range that interacts with water molecules and cellular communication in the body. So it supports microcirculation, those little teeny tiny microscopic capillaries that you can't see with the naked eye. That's where terahertz shines. So better microcirculation means you're going to get improved oxygen delivery, and that means everywhere in the body, the blood, the tissues, the organs, and better metabolic efficiency at the cellular level overall. So when tissues become well oxygenated and the energy production is more efficient, that stress signaling drops way down.
Exactly. And that part is huge because when tissues are underoxygenated, what they do is they start to signal distress, and the
Yep.
brain reads that as a threat. So, improving circulation actually reduces a lot of what's going on in the background there.
Right. So I like to tell people too, they come to us really symptomatic and they think, I have all these symptoms. I have all these symptoms. Like, your nervous system is just out of whack. And they always, kind of are like stalled, like, what do you mean? What do you mean? Well, people don't realize how many symptoms can be related to the nervous system just being dysregulated. And that's where all of this falls under that umbrella. And of course, we're going to explore that as the channel grows. But um, it's really wild to think that all these things that we've been taught, hey, this symptom, suppress this symptom, suppress that symptom, suppress this symptom, all the whole time, it's been our nervous system trying to tell us something is wrong. It's been trying to
Exactly.
communicate that signal. And I tell all my clients, symptoms are signals. They're not a bad thing. That's your body trying to protect you, your body trying to save you. So we need to thank our symptoms because they are the communication for the internal body, the state of the internal body. So we need to learn how to listen to them. So next, I want to go over what it looks like in real life when you increase that membrane potential and the neurons start firing the way they're supposed to once again. Okay. So you're going to notice things like shorter panic episodes. You're going to notice faster recovery after stress, better sleep, fewer 3 a.m. cortisol spikes. Your heart rate will start to settle down and regulate. And that heart rate variability piece matters.
Exactly, because that heart rate variability reflects how well the parasympathetic nervous system can counterbalance stress. So, if that
Yes.
heart rate variability improves, it means the body can exit fight or flight faster, which is huge. I mean,
Yeah.
I cannot stress how important that really is. So, instead of staying stuck in that sympathetic dominance, it can actually shift back
Right.
down, which I find incredible.
Well, what's crazy is when people start to apply this tech to their body, they often get, they'll complain, "Oh my gosh, I'm just so tired. I can't keep my head up." And they often think, "Well, this I can't live like this. I'm sleepy," which I'm like, "Okay, yeah, that part's difficult, but we're not sedating the system. We're stabilizing the electrical environment. And when the nervous system finally gets that signal to stand down, it goes into the parasympathetic state, which is the rest, digest, and repair state, which is what we want. Okay. So if
Exactly.
you're just now using this device and you're like, oh my gosh, why am I so tired? That's normal. That's your nervous system starting to fire correctly again. It just takes a bit for it to balance. And pacing really matters. So if someone runs the device too high, too fast, they can overstimulate the nervous system temporarily. Now, this does go away if you tend to overdo it, if you've overdone it in the past, or you understand what I'm saying because I overdid it at the beginning. I started to feel better, and I was like, oh, I need to do this more, and that's actually the opposite of how frequency therapies work. Um,
Exactly.
because a reactive system is going to react to everything, so we start slow, short sessions, consistent signals to that nervous system, and we have that low baseline signal going to the nervous system over time. And guess what? The nervous system starts to recalibrate and start understanding what we're trying to tell it to do, and it starts to stand down.
Exactly. So recalibration, it's not just suppression.
Right.
It's pretty much shifting your baseline. So lower baseline stress chemistry, or more stable membrane potential, improved vagal tone, better circulation, higher firing threshold. That means that the same external stressor produces a smaller internal reaction, which is huge.
Right. So in simple terms, because I always like to explain things both ways, because we can get technical and nerdy all day long, but some people, they go cross-eyed when we're talking with all these big words and stuff. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
just think of it like this. On Monday, you got an email from one of your customers. Let's say you work in retail or something. You got an email from one of your customers and they absolutely cussed you out. And all of a sudden you feel that adrenaline shot up, the cortisol rise. You feel all that stuff happening. You feel that physical reaction to that person talking to you like absolute crap. And guess what? You're already dysregulated. You already struggle with panic. You already struggle with, other mental health issues, which are all nervous system related, which we'll get into later. But you're already struggling. You're already struggling to feel normal anyway. And then this stressful thing happens Monday at work. And then you can't come back down because you're already in this heightened state. So that stress on top of your state being heightened, it'll just keep you in this loop, right? So when you add the voltage, guess what? When she sends that email next time to cuss you out, you're not going to get that adrenaline surge, that cortisol surge. It doesn't do it. You're not as sensitive. I used to be so emotionally sensitive. And I now realize that's because my nervous system was like, my whole life. I didn't know that, but that's what was going on. I was super hyper reactive emotionally to things because my nervous system was so dysregulated. And I remember being like that since a child. But since I've started using voltage and balancing, I'm a lot more sane, probably a lot more fun to be around. um,
Same.
right? It's been quite the transition. So I just want to remind you that a lot of these I do not subscribe to that whole camp of you have depression, you have ADHD, I don't believe in labels. I believe in listening to the body signals. I just really want to encourage you for listening today. Anxiety does not mean you are broken. It doesn't mean that you're not fixable. It means that your survival system is firing too easily, and there is a fix for that. There is an absolute fix for that. And that fix comes with supporting the foundations of the body, which are voltage and minerals. You'll hear us talk about voltage and minerals all the time on this channel as we go forward. So get used to it. But that's the shift. The body becomes resilient instead of reactive. That's what happens when you give it the proper support tools, the proper foundations, not treating anxiety as a label, but supporting the electrical system that creates that reaction. So, when that baseline drops, the spikes drop. And when the spikes drop, panic loses its fuel. It's a beautiful thing. And that is the mechanism. Hopefully that all made sense. And that's why this blend is so important here. Mandy, I think we're going to wrap it up there. Did you have anything you wanted to add? Personal experience, anything like that?
Not at the moment, but I
Okay.
just have to say that this is one thing that has really been life-changing for me.
Hmm.
And it's interesting whenever we talk about this kind of from an anxiety standpoint because emotionally, just
Hmm.
oddly enough, it seems like I'm doing so much better.
Yeah, that was one of the biggest shifts I realized was happening probably like 3 weeks in. I had a huge, what I call a trauma dump.
Yeah.
And I just started like crying for 10 years of not crying or 10 years of suppressing my emotions. It all started to bubble out and I was like, what the heck is going on? Because when I first started using this tech, I had no idea what was happening. I just knew it was working. So I didn't understand all the mechanisms of it 3 years ago. That's why I took the ropes and I'm like, I got to figure out what's actually happening because I want to be able to explain it. But yeah, the anxiety piece, the depression piece, the insomnia piece, all of that has improved. And that's just a small list of things that I had wrong with me when I started. So yeah, well, thank you so much, Mandy, for being here. I'm super excited to keep doing this series with you. It's so fun, and we're learning as we go, of course, too, because we've looked into so many things in depth. But this is forcing us to take an even deeper look and do our research and our homework so we can teach you guys. So if you like what you're seeing, please like and subscribe. Please, if somebody shared this video with you, please get back to that person because we do not mention the product name here. You have to get in touch with the person who sent you this information. And yeah, I hope you guys have a great day. Happy vibes, high frequency, and talk to you next time.